This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad and live today. This past Sunday at church, I was tempted to keep my sermon extremely short for the simple fact that I believe that Lutherans have a very good grasp of the gospel message for the day. Again, here's the scenario for the gospel. Jesus is eating a meal at the home of one of the leaders of the Pharisees when he sees all the guests kind of jockeying for positions at the table. So in a teaching moment, Jesus offers up the first of two parables for his guests. In the first one, he says that when you are invited to a wedding banquet, don't sit in the place of honor in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by the host. Rather, when you are invited, go and sit down at one of the lower places, and so that when the host does come, he may say to you, "Hey, friend, move up higher." So on Sunday, as I was mentioning all of this, I told the congregation that based on the Lutheran tendency in worship to sit in the back of the sanctuary at all costs, I would guess that we all have heard this particular parable before, and we've taken it to heart, and we don't need any further teaching from it. Anyway, in all seriousness, Jesus ends this parable with the following words. He says, "For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted." My guess is we all know what it feels like to be exalted and to be humbled. I remember the first time I bowled the best game of my life. It was a 226. Oh my gosh, it was awesome. I was so pumped up. I was hitting strikes, I was hitting spares, I couldn't miss. I was walking around like I should be on the Professional Bowlers Association. Now, as I rolled my next game, I kind of popped like a balloon. I quickly plummeted to earth. I literally sunk deep into the gutter as I managed only a measly 86. I had nothing left. I was quite embarrassed. Now, this happens all the time in recreation. Just go ask any golfer. And it happens in work as well, as we have the week of our lives where we're riding high, where we're feeling like we are experts in our field, only to have a deal fall through. A complication rises up. A crisis rears its head. A client runs away. A program fails miserably. A sermon lulls a congregation to sleep. We're reminded that we're human, that we're not perfect, that we don't have all the answers, and that we should really remain humble in all that we do. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Nowhere is this more evident than when we compare ourselves with God. The blemishes and the imperfections that we have, they're highlighted. We're not as great as we think we are. We're not as cool or as important or as powerful or as influential. We become humbled when we walk with God because our flaws are exposed. As one theologian states, however much we know, we still know very little compared to the total sum of knowledge. However important we may believe ourselves to be, even when death removes us or we retire from our position, life and work will go on just the same. This is humbling indeed. But isn't this the whole point? By choosing to follow Christ, we are in essence choosing humility. We consciously are saying to ourselves, Jesus is the one who I wish to emulate. He is my model for living. Therefore, as we try to walk in his holy footsteps of service and compassion, we cannot escape the comparisons. We are measured next to Jesus, and we truly see how far short we fall of God's glory. Therefore, we have no choice but to be humbled. Now, the safe route would be to just not follow Jesus at all. Hence, you're not compared to him. I mean, if Jesus is out of sight, if he's out of mind, then hey, there's no deficiency on our part, or so we believe. It's kind of like the guy who's going on a long road trip in his car and he starts hearing some banging in the engine. Now, instead of pulling over to check out to see what's going on, or to even taking it to a body shop or an auto shop to get it fixed, he simply just cranks up the radio so he can't hear the banging noise. Hey, I don't hear anything. Everything sounds great to me. My car is running fine. The banquet analogy in the first parable of our gospel is a good one because it tells us that we need to exhibit a quality of humility in all that we do. But just as Jesus does, he takes it one step further, and he shares with us the second parable. In it, he says that when you give a luncheon or you give a dinner, don't invite your friends and relatives, but invite those on the fringes of society, the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Now, I believe Jesus is all for good Christian fellowship. You know, dinner amongst friends, social gatherings together, and certainly Oktoberfests at the church. There's nothing wrong with any of that. In fact, my guess is that Jesus encourages this type of behavior. But the point he's trying to make has to do with service. Which type of meal is going to go further in terms of service in God's kingdom? At the church I work at, House of Prayer, we're involved with a ministry called Family Promise, where we house at the church for a week at a time families who have been displaced from their homes. Now, in addition to hosting them as a place where they can sleep, we provide our guests with breakfasts and dinners. Now, when we feed these families and share a meal with them, I can't begin to tell you the amount of gratitude we receive. The thanks just pours from their hearts as they truly appreciate the gestures of compassion and love that are intertwined with their meals. Now, how is this different from a meal shared with friends? Well, when you invite friends over for dinner, they most likely at the end of the meal will say, "Man, this was great. I had a wonderful time. Next time, I'll have you come over to my house." Well, you don't get this type of response with Family Promise. You'll get a handshake or a hug or maybe even a simple thank you. Chances are probably you won't run into them again, and they surely aren't going to try to repay you with dinner or any kind of token of appreciation. And this is the difference. The meal with friends is conducted out of a love that many times is reciprocated. The meal with the disenfranchised is done humbly out of the love of Christ for the fellow children of God, with absolutely no favors in return expected. In the conclusion of the letter to the Hebrews, we hear the following words: "Let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Do not neglect to do good and to share what you have, for such sacrifices are pleasing to God." This is the formula we follow as disciples of Jesus. By placing others in front of ourselves, we humbly say, "Come here, my friend. Have my seat. I've got your back. I'm going to do what I can to help meet your needs." We mimic the gracious hospitality that epitomized Jesus' entire ministry, a ministry that was fulfilled when he so unselfishly sacrificed himself on the cross. For who? For all people, with nothing expected in return. Our faith journey begins with us standing in the shadow of the cross, and it continues as we extend God's unconditional love to the ones who need it the most. Our journey ends with us at the doors of God's great heavenly banquet hall in the sky. So humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Choose humility. Choose Christ. Amen. Remember as you go about your day that yesterday is gone, tomorrow does not yet belong to you. So why not live today, knowing that you never walk alone? See y'all next week. Later.